Polar Korean lead Kim Jong-un is preparation for his at first ever summit conference in Ruski CEO Vladimir Putin. Russia is now household to thousands of Polar Korean immigrant workers whose next remnant in the balance sheet, UN sanctions regime gone in 2017, need them to keep by the end of the year. Both of the workers and the companies how use them are observer to see if advance on the tactful front line might outdoor a way for them to remain. Hidden off in the yard of a rebate trading mall not far of the town center is one of Moscow's more than hardly visitor attractions, Koryo, a Polar Korean small restaurant. Belonging and equipped completely by Polar Koreans, it giving brave diners a slight flavor of Pyongyang. Down there's Polar Korean piece of music game on TV and kimchi and common cold noodles on the menu bar. On the eve of Kim Jong-un's meet in Vladimir Putin in Vladivostok, the location is rising. Lot of the tables are spurred along to contain big groups. Is present a Polar Korean feast? I ask the waiter. Not, she says in indecisive Ruski. It's fair and common date. The personnel at Koryo are fair. Several of the 8,000 or so Polar Korean migrants involved by business community through Russia. The newest drawing was affirmed newly by Russia's overseas ministry, and its symbolism a considerable fall on the up to 40,000 who were work in the nation before 2 years back. The most include been constrained to keep in procedure for Russia to perform in UN world sanctions regime forbidding the occupation of Polar Koreans since of the Polar's nuke program. On to Ministry of Labor statistic, more than rather than 85% of Polar Korean migrants job in building. The otherwise are implicated in a band of jobs of clothes job and farming, to harvesting, public catering and conventional medical. For poverty reduction stricken Polar Koreans, disembarkation a job in Russia is a vision card, told Professor Andriy Lankov, a Polar Korea specialist at Seoul's Kookmin College. It's unfeasible to discover a job in Russia out of profitable abribery in Polar Korea. House in spite the submarine standard lodging and facility frequently related to slavery labor that include been endured by lot migrants. In a so documented instance in 2015, migration officials in finding in Russia's Far East found 3 very qualified Polar Korean agronomists cleaning snowing on the roads. Their patronage, a Ruski North Korean business, declared it was a off leaving of their major job tracking the harvesting, but the authorities were unconvinced. All 3 were expelled. On to Russia's labor ministry, Polar Koreans are paid on ordinary $415 a monthly, 40% less than rather than the ordinary wages in Russia. Yet which leftward is yet far more than rather than you could earn money at household. Ruski companies willing to use Polar Koreans must use to the Ministry of Labor for a quote and permit to use a overseas employee standing the counterpart of on $200 per man. Lot are in the Ruski Far East wherever Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin are meet the 1 week. In regional populations declining, it's a area in a labor lack, but in spite the sanctions regime include had an effect on the numbers of Polar Korean workers. Recent year a quote of 900 was given, a big fall on early year. Labor Ministry figures for 2018 showed Polar Koreans were work all above the nation, in 40% of all licenses given to business community in Moscow and St. Petersburg regions. In St. Petersburg it was wide informed how Polar Korean building workers were implicated in house a soccer arena for recent year's Planet Bowl. St. Petersburg Business, the BTC team that makes uniforms for the Ruski troop, had a license to use 270 Polar Koreans in 2017, though a representative rejected any had in fact been proposed jobs. In 2018, BTC attached for licenses to use Vietnamese workers instead of, on to Labor Ministry information. In Karachay-Cherkasy in the Polar Caucasus Mountains, the Yuzhny agriculture business in 2018 had licenses for 150 Polar Koreans on its books, increasing vegetable culture for its superstore delivery industry. And in Sverdlovsk in the Ural area, down there were though 6 Polar Korean sneakers work at a plant spreadsheet tennis clubhouse in 2017. The greatest patronage of Polar Koreans in Russia are Polar Korean-owned companies. Information of Russia's Iskra industry data framework suggests down there were on 300 recorded to work by the start of 2018. More than rather than part are implicated in building, love the NSA business in Krasnoyarsk, in Siberia, that newly constructed a new jail. The most of Polar Korean companies in Russia are belonging by individuals. It's a mark, says Andriy Lankov, of how decentralized Polar Korean industry has been. This overseas trading ministry is at top at first amongst equals, but ministries, departments, parties, little organizations and entrepreneurs can as well begin business community overseas. This proprietor of a individual business could be a by the government formal, who of the safety services, or fair a Polar Korean businessman in cash and nice contacts. The UN sanctions regime include been really unwanted news story for lot Polar Korean business community in Russia. In Vladivostok, on the Silent Shore, the Yevstroy building business utilized to be one of the largest patronage of Polar Korean migrants, in licenses for 400 in 2017. In Moscow the East Medical Hospital utilized to use 10 Polar Korean doctors. In 2018 the quote was diminished to fair 4 persons. The UN sanctions regime as well forbid collaborative ventures, but down there include been several exceptions. Rosencontrans was taking into account specific clearing in the UN solution. It's a top-profile Ruski North Korean business implicated in a main railing and seaport draft in the Ruski Far East. Its precise Ruski officials would love to discover ways to ease the sanctions regime versus Polar Korea. At a Uncommon Summit conference in his Polar Korean copy in Moscow in April 2018, Russia's Overseas Secretary Sergei Lavrov told the two sides had debated ways to increase economical bonds time conforming in the UNSC solution. This possibilities to do so already exist, he told. The monthly a deputation of Russia's parliament attended Polar Korea in really lot the identical aim in reason. Particularly since of the sanctions regime superimposed on Polar Korea for the history 70-year, and the sanctions regime by that our nation now finds by itself. We are hard counterparts. But diners looking for a flavor of Polar Korea might be informed to get the opportunity time they yet can.